The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience. Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. This is the conclusion of early rankings week for 2018 fantasy football. If you missed any of the shows, hit the description. They'll all be there. Running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks. That would be it in the description. Because today is tight ends. Give the episode a like, rate, and review on the audio feed underneath the Pat Mayo Experience. Helps keep the show free. Everyone likes that part of it. Tight ends with Jake Ciely from Fantasy Radio, from the Fantasy Sports Network, from RotoExperts.com. One of the most accurate rankers in the entire world. What's going on?
From everything you could possibly find out there. Yeah, just throw a rock, you find me. And those super accurate rankings. How you been, Pat?
Hey, listen, I'm all right. We're talking tight ends. This is going to be a little bit loosey-goosey because it's tight ends. So off the hop, I guess we should really kind of address what's going on at the beginning with Hunter Henry. Hurt himself in practice, going to be out for the season. Where did you have him initially? Because he was being drafted as the 6th overall tight end, which put him in like round 6. Everyone was kind of hyping him as the guy to break out this year. So is there a new guy everyone's going to hype to break out this year? And do we look at whoever ends up replacing him as like a viable member of the tight end community here in fantasy? Because even if they like re-sign Antonio Gates or go get someone else, like Chargers tight ends do have a long track record of being good. Now, a lot of that has to do with Antonio Gates being their tight end for so long, but Phillip Rivers likes throwing to big dudes.
He does. This is like there's 15 questions you've embedded in there. So with the first thing first is I actually had Hunter Henry even higher than that. In non-PPR, I had him as the 2nd tight end. In PPR, I had him 4th behind Ertz and Kelce, jumping him in PPR. Actually, half-point PPR too. The biggest vault came because of the touchdowns. You talk about Antonio Gates. During his prime seasons, which were about a 6-7 year stretch, he was averaging 8 touchdowns a year, and that includes when he was only playing 12 games and 13 games in a lot of those. And that's just the average over their season. So if you talk about a per game basis, it's even higher. I had him projected for actually 8.1 touchdowns, and that's why he was 2nd in non-PPR, because as you mentioned, Phillip Rivers really likes to use the tight end. It's an integral part of that offense. Hunter Henry has already shown his touchdown upside 2 years ago, splitting it with Antonio Gates. Fell back a little bit last year, but the excitement was all that. It's all his now. They probably go back and see if Antonio wants to play one more year. I think if you talk about that, Antonio Gates will be a fringe tight end 1 at this point of his career, given his ability and starting to fall off. It's hard to rely on him every single week. But to answer the third part of the question, I actually think, I'll save it for when we start getting to those names as we go through the rankings. I think there's 2 guys, actually 3, but I'm not in on one of them, that people are going to start hyping as the next potential breakout, not on the Gates or not especially even on the Hunter Henry level. But there are other options out there. There's nobody that's going to come close to what Henry could possibly have done, though.
If they do sign Antonio Gates, where do you think he would slot into the rankings? Would he be top 10, fringy top 10?
I'm looking right now. In non-PPR, I would say outside the top. Actually, probably right around Charles Clay when we get to him. So if you want to look at the rankings, he'd probably be about there because PPR is not that great. Non-PPR, yeah, he could start knocking on that top 10 door.
All right, so what does this do to the Chargers offense? Let's say they don't sign Antonio Gates. I would think that you're going to see a few more goal line touches for Melvin Gordon. Instead of them throwing, they'll just hand it off to their guy in the backfield around the goal line. Or maybe Tyrell the Gazelle, Terrell Williams. He's the biggest body that they have out there. I mean, Travis Benjamin's little, Keenan Allen's little. I don't know what to make of Mike Williams, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't even know if he's any good or not. I know Williams is pretty good, and he's a bigger body. Could he see more targets because of this?
No, so it's interesting you said that because you kind of melded 2 things together of where I was going to go with this is I was already on the camp of people forgot about Mike Williams. He is extremely talented, and people are going to and have forgotten about him last year because of the injury and everything that went on with him. But the kid is extremely talented, and you want to talk about a big body, he is your big body in the red zone. I already went on record saying, this is before Hunter Henry, saying, don't forget about him because I see him ending up as the number 2 option in this offense, probably not from week 1, but it will happen. So because of this injury, I come back to Tyrell Williams, and I says this helps Tyrell Williams maintain some of his value. I actually thought Tyrell Williams was going to be the biggest the person who lost the most value by the emergence of Hunter Henry and with Mike Williams in his 2nd year and now healthy. So I think this helps Tyrell Williams get his value back. But You look at that, if they sign Antonio Gates, I still think Tyrell will be affected less than if Hunter Henry was out there. And to talk about the backfield, I don't think it's just Melvin Gordon, but we know that they like passing to their running backs. I think Justin Jackson is that sleeper, deep PPR option for like looking for maybe a best case scenario. He turns into like 80-90% of Danny Woodhead.
I mean, we're just throwing out Austin Eckler. I know he dealt with the hand and wrist injury last season, but he seemed to be the guy that started monopolizing that old type of Danny Woodhead / Darren Sproles role in the Chargers offense. I don't see why he wouldn't continue doing that.
Only because I think that Justin Jackson has a higher ceiling in the passing game. I owned Austin Eckler in a decent amount of leagues last year just because halfway through the season, when you look at the waiver wire, you start looking for those, all right, if this guy gets hurt, who's going to be coming up? Because there's not options really left on the waiver wire at that point. And you're right, he did look well and did perform well at times. But the point being is I'm looking for the ceiling. I think that Eckler falls back into that third role where if something happened to Gordon, he would take that lead. But if you're talking about the pure pass catching only, I think Jackson has more ability in that facet.
All right, let's get into the rankings. You're number one, no shocker. I think it's been the same number one for everyone for basically 8 years now. Rob Gronkowski is at the top of the rankings. He's followed by Zach Ertz and Travis Kelce. To make mention, this is full PPR scoring that we're doing here. It doesn't seem like there is much of a difference between these three guys at the moment, especially even when it comes to early ADP. They're going in that order. It's going Gronk, Kelce, Ertz in terms of PPR, but they're all going in the third round. No longer is Rob Gronkowski a first-round pick, and that might actually make him somewhat of a value if he's actually committed to playing this season. And playing it fully, doesn't get hurt, the whole shebang that you get with Gronk every single season. But are these three on a tier by themselves in terms of PPR?
No question about it. And honestly, you could make the argument that Gronkowski is like not a full, but like a half a tier by himself, just because if he ever plays 16 games, we know what Rob Gronkowski is over 16 games. And he's not going to be in the conversation with Travis Kelce. He's going to be up there by his own. It won't be a huge gap, but there will be a little bit of a gap. But yes, to say that is before with the Hunter Henry situation is you had some people who, like myself, had him in that tier. Some people would have said, no, he starts the next tier. Without Hunter Henry, there's no question about it. It's these three, and then let's have the conversation for everybody else.
Well, what do we do with tight ends and drafts then? Would you spend the draft capital to go up and get one of these guys in the third round, or does it depend on the approach that you take at the beginning of the draft? Because let's say you end up with the fourth pick and Antonio Brown falls to you, and you take Antonio Brown there, and then you don't have a running back yet. Do you then have to spend one of your next two picks on a running back? Could you afford to go wide receiver, tight end to start your draft? That doesn't seem optimal. It could be, but it doesn't seem that way.
No, see, you know me. I'm always going to get at least one bell cow running back in the first 2 rounds. I've been doing it for years. It's what's won me championships at some high levels, and I'm going to continue doing so. And I know some people will disagree. And you can always play your own way. This is the only way to win in fantasy. If you look at it, and there are studies behind it to show that taking a tight end early leads to a lesser opportunity of winning. If it hits, and like you get Gronkowski in the third round and he plays 16 games, now you've vastly increased your opportunity for that. But at the same time, you also can't miss on one of your early running backs. Like you can't have an injury. So it's just putting a lot of eggs in the injury and the opportunity basket there, where if it hits, it's similar to like the 0 RB of the years. It's similar to like baseball, whether you take pitchers early or something, all these type of things. All these formulas can work. All these strategies can work. Just with this one, if you take a tight end early, it's just more risk. It's a fact. And I'm never going to do it. If Gronkowski fell to the 4th round, I'd be all over it, but it's never happening. He's never going to make it that far. Kelce, end of the 4th, 5th round, I'd probably consider it. Same thing for Ertz, and those only being in PPR leagues. But outside of PPR and non-PPR, that you need to make it to the 6th. And then, like I said, these guys aren't making it there anyway, so it never happens for me.
Well, if you look at it from an overall perspective, when people are drafting, if you just not even sort by tight end, but sort by all positions, you start saying, hey, where are these guys actually going? So Rob Gronkowski is being drafted around guys like Tyreek Hill and Adam Thielen and Doug Baldwin, who I love this year. And if you watch the wide receiver show, you'll know I love Doug Baldwin. But that's the tier of wide receiver that you're getting. So let's say you started running back. And then, hey, who's left on the board? Oh, I need to get a receiver. Sometimes it's not always the best to take that receiver if the tight end is actually better than the receivers that are somewhat available at that spot. So when we get down to the Zach Ertz tier, let's put in Ertz here, see what's going on. So Zach Ertz is going around Larry Fitzgerald and Josh Gordon and Amari Cooper. I would rather have Larry Fitzgerald than Zach Ertz, but I think I'd rather have Zach Ertz than Josh Gordon, than Amari Cooper, than Allen Robinson, than Demaryius Thomas, and all those guys. And I think on a per-game basis, not only is Zach Ertz going to be around equivalent in terms of points, you get so much position value because of it, because listen, there's only like 3 good tight ends. Everyone else is going to be relatively inconsistent, that the value of that position would mean a lot more.
See, and I understand everything you're saying, and I still would take the majority of those wide receivers, even over Ertz. I'm not going to argue with you long because the value is close, so you are right in that facet. The reason I'm saying no, and the difference is because it's actually what comes after that. And looking at the wide receivers, we were joking about it before the show. I've already done 4 magazine mocks already, got another one today. And there's a severe drop-off, at least in my opinion, once you start talking about, I'm looking right now, the Cooper. I'm not even a big fan of Cooper, you know that. Let's say, forget him, but like Juju Smith-Schuster, Gordon, Alshon Jeffrey, Golden Tate, Stephon Diggs, because then you get into that next group and you start talking about Crabtree and Garcon and Sammy Watkins and Crowder and all those guys. That's where I have the problem, is I don't want to get into that group of tier of wide receivers for my second option. Now, if I went wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and like you said, they're in their 4th round, I would consider it because I have the 2 wide receivers on my team. I just don't want, if I went running back, wide receiver, tight end, or anything where the facet of I'm getting my second wide receiver in that conversation of names, I just don't want that on my team.
So I don't even know if I would have Gronk at number 1. I think you can make a case for Ertz there just because he doesn't come along. He does have injury history, but he doesn't come along with the same sort of injury history that Rob Gronkowski does. You're probably leaving.
Why not Kelce?
That's what I want to talk about. So with Kelce, we have a new quarterback in place. You add Sammy Watkins into the mix as just another body to catch passes. We saw Mahomes in the one game. I believe it was Demetrius Harris ended up with an excellent game, and he just found him up the seam, down the middle the entire time. Kelce could be on that same sort of upside level as Gronkowski, but I don't think his floor is as safe as someone like Zach Ertz, that if I'm playing PPR and I want week-to-week consistency, I think Ertz is just kind of the guy for me.
Yeah, so if you're looking at, well, you're not, but if you look at my projections when they're on the site and all that type of part of the edge package, all that type of stuff, I have Ertz for more receptions. I actually have Ertz for less yards, more receptions, and about 1 more touchdown. To your point, is that week-to-week consistency, it's not as big play as Travis Kelce, but the consistency is there, and you have to factor in the Patrick Mahomes hype, which is just absurd at this point. One of the drafts I just did, he was the 7th quarterback off the board, which is insane to me. Stop buying all the risk, everybody, because now if you just bought him at peak value. Like, I don't understand it. But that all being said, Patrick Mahomes, you do have to factor in his first full season playing in the NFL. You can watch a show on ESPN and NFL Live. You can watch NFL Network. You can watch all these former players who come out and say the exact same thing. The second year is the toughest year for a quarterback. And it technically really is the second year for Mahomes because he had that couple of performances where we got to see a little bit of him the full game. We got to see, and now teams know to watch him and to look for him and look, where do you exploit him? Where do you exploit his weaknesses? And that's why you see a lot of quarterbacks dip down in year 2 and then bounce back in year 3. So I think not factoring that in and factoring in with Kelce is why I'm with you. And that's actually why Kelce is behind Ertz for me.
All right, so the rest of your top 10 goes Greg Olsen, Evan Engram, Delanie Walker, Jack Doyle, Jordan Reed, Kyle Rudolph, and Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham's a really interesting one because he is being drafted 4th off the board in terms of tight ends, and he's kind of like on a little mini ADP tier of his own. There's the top 3 guys, then there's Jimmy Graham, then there's Greg Olsen, then there's the rest in the way that people are drafting, at least at this point. And again, these are early rankings, so of course these are early ADPs. But I can see him sticking around this, and I'm kind of with you on this one. I don't know if I'll have him as low as 10, just because of the touchdown upside that he can bring. And I know we can get into the chat about, hey, Aaron Rodgers doesn't make tight ends any good. That's fine. You could throw to Jimmy Graham here. We'll see. I think there's a lot of risk associated with Jimmy Graham, and he strikes me as one of those guys where I just talked about how I like the consistency of Ertz week to week, and that's what I find alluring about him. Jimmy Graham is the exact opposite. If he's not scoring touchdowns, he's doing fuck all.
And that's the biggest problem. Look at last year. It wasn't for a touchdown. It's non-existent. And I know, to your point, you just said it. And that's where the hype's coming from. It's Aaron Rodgers and the quarterback, which, by the way, Aaron Rodgers has, a quarterback tight end matchup with Aaron Rodgers hasn't had value since Jermichael Finley.
And even then, I think people remember that as being a whole lot better than it actually was. Because,
that's true.
Because there was that video of him catching 2 balls at the same time. That's it.
Yep. It's 100%. And if you look at the only tight end since Jermichael Finley that's finished as a tight end one was Richard Rodgers, only because of his 8 touchdowns. And you look at the yards, I think it was 500, and maybe it wasn't even 500. Point all being is Jimmy Graham could basically replicate last year with Aaron Rodgers and end up as a top 10 tight end one. But it's going to be the week to week. It's the Amari Cooper effect. It's the Brandon Cooks effect. It's week to week. You don't know what you're going to get. And the margin between Jimmy Graham and these other guys, I mean, in non-PPR, we're talking about 10 points all the way from Greg Olsen to Jimmy Graham. That's the gap is 10 points. It's a little bit bigger, and that's why he's at 10. And that, again, that's non-PPR where he ranks higher. In PPR is because the week to week and the number of receptions he gets is just not that high. He's got a very low floor in PPR. That's why he's this far back for me, and he's not going to end up on any of my teams.
Well, the thing is, if he was going later in drafts, I would actually like him because I do believe that he does present touchdown upside. And if I'm going to spend an 11th round pick on a tight end or an 8th round pick, that's exactly what I'm looking for. But like currently, he's going inside the top 50 picks around guys like Brandon Cooks, Demaryius Thomas, Golden Tate, Juju Smith-Schuster. Hell, Russell Wilson's going right there. I'd probably rather have Russell Wilson, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't love drafting quarterbacks super highly, but I'd rather have Russell Wilson. I'd rather have Darius Geis. I'd rather have Julian Edelman. I'd rather have Dion Lewis. I'd rather have Crabtree. And like you, I'd rather have Greg Olsen.
Yeah, I mean, keep going. I mean, honestly, go to the first name, the one name right in front of him, Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph, guess who he has a quarterback this year? Guess who likes going to his tight end? Guess who is a very aggressive passer? Oh, Kirk Cousins with the Vikings. You remember tight end? You remember Kyle Rudolph from 2016, who was the number 2 tight end in fantasy football, and everybody forgot. And it was like, oh my God, Kyle Rudolph's going to do it again last year. And then, of course, we have the injuries with the quarterbacks and Case Keenum coming in and all that. Kyle Rudolph could bounce right back. I'm not saying he's going to be the number 2 tight end, but he could right back in that top 5, top 6 conversation.
Well, my problem with this whole Minnesota offense is they're getting an awful lot of hype right now. They're all being drafted super highly.
But nobody likes Kyle Rudolph.
But Kyle Rudolph is still going to appear inside like the top 10 of everyone's rankings. People are going to just trust him as a safe QB. But what if this Minnesota offense takes a step backwards under Kirk Cousins? Like it's plausible. They lost their offensive coordinator.
And I don't think it's going to be an effect where you see that having a drop off with that talent with Kirk Cousins coming in. I say if you gave me odds on it, I'd give you 50-1 that it severely drops back.
Okay, I think 9 is a fair spot for him, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. That's the point. Is the 9, but it's also about where he's going overall. You're going to take Jimmy Graham where he's going. Even if you want to make the argument that Graham deserves to be in front of Rudolph, I'll wait the extra 4 to 5 rounds and take Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah, and well, you have Greg Olsen at number 4 in this mix. Do you think that he's like you go Olsen, Engram, Delanie Walker? Do you think that those 3 guys are sort of a tier by themselves? Is Greg Olsen a little bit separated from them? Or would you even include like Jack Doyle into that mix or Jordan Reed into that mix?
No, so actually they are. If you want to, so I do tiers and also try to use points to help me do the tiers because I don't want to ever take my own biases into account. So for argument's sake, I have Greg Olsen at 181 in PPR. Jordan Reed is at 174. Okay. So there you go. The math right there is they deserve to be in a tier together. I'd probably say if you're talking draft-wise, Olsen, Engram, and Walker are in a tier by their own because the Jack Doyle risk of Andrew Luck, the risk of how much does Eric Ebron affect them, even though Eric Ebron's hands suck, he's still will be affect some weeks. Jordan Reed, when's the last time? Never. He's played 16 games. So I think that's why drafting wise, they would be in a separate tier. Optimistically, they deserve to all 5 be together.
All right. So what do you make of Evan Engram in this new look Giants offense with OBJ coming back? You put Barkley in the backfield, an improved offensive line. He was someone that obviously scored very well last season, but again, he was wildly inconsistent and really disappointed in really good matchups. Or is he someone that needs to get 6 to 8 targets a game and he's better off when the better players are around him?
Yeah, so I think this is a little bit of both, but the biggest factor here is talking about the Giants for this year. You've already seen some of the beat reporters talk about it, and it only makes sense if you look at this team and you look at Shermer coming in, is that you're going to see more 12s. You're going to see more 2 tight ends on the field with Rhett Ellison, who people forgot about that they brought in specifically to be more of a blocking tight end. That you have Evan Engram that can now be their 3rd quote-unquote receiver because he's not a very good blocker. That's not what they drafted him for. That's not what he's on the team for. If you go back to the argument, I think people remember this 2 years ago, it was the Quincy Enunwa. He's kind of more of a hybrid tight end wide receiver than a true wide receiver. I mean, you could kind of make the same argument for Evan Engram. He's not a real tight end. His size and where he played in college put him there, but he's more of a wide receiver than tight end. So the Giants didn't bring in Des Bryant. They didn't draft anybody to be that option to alongside Sterling Shepard or push Shepard. Shepard is their number 2, and Evan Engram is basically their number 3. So you see a lot more sets with it's going to be Engram on the field a lot with a blocking tight end at times, and I'm not worried about it. So I'm not worried about Saquon Barkley is going to take away and a healthy Odell Beckham. I think the emergence of Engram is why he's in this spot and not higher. Like, he was number 5 tight end last year. He's not taking another step forward, but I think you can look at what he did last year with not a lot of competition, pasted over this year with the improvement and the efficiency in the offense, and not be too worried about it.
Has anyone ever lost drafting Delanie Walker for where he goes every single year? Right now he's going, like you mentioned, Kyle Rudolph is kind of a deal. He's in like that, pick 70 area. Delanie Walker's in like the pick 90 area. He has 4 consecutive seasons of over 800 yards, over 100 targets. He's played at least 15 games in each of the past 4 seasons. He's going to have his bad weeks because he's a tight end, and they all kind of do. But like when it comes to just trying to mine some safety at this position, Delanie Walker is not sexy. No one really likes him. Yeah, he's getting older, but does it really even matter? Just kind of pencil him in and he's good to go?
I mean, Delanie Walker's nickname should just be plus EV. It doesn't matter. Like, no matter where you spent the cost, he's returning value because you never pay that much to get him. One of the magazine mocks where I took Kyle Rudolph, I think it was like the 9th or the 10th round, Delanie Walker still hung around until the 11th. I'm just sitting there like, what does Delanie Walker have to do to get respect? And the only reason I didn't take Delanie and I took Kyle Rudolph is because at that point I already had Corey Davis on my team, I believe. So that was the only thing, is I split up the fact of the ownership. But Delanie Walker, you're right. Every single year he goes way too late, and every single year he gives you return value.
And he's one of those, like, tight ends so difficult. Like, if you have one of the very top end guys, of course you're just going to play those guys every week. But even you get into the Jack Doyle circumstances where, hey, is this going to be a Jack Doyle week or is this going to be a 0 Jack Doyle week? Delanie Walker's just not one of those guys. Like, even his crappy PPR weeks, he's like 4 for 21. He got you 6 points, which is better than every other tight end who didn't score random tight end that didn't score a touchdown that week.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is if you're looking for the week-to-week consistency, there's few that provide more than Delanie Walker.
So the next two, I would almost consider Jack Doyle and Jordan Reed to be on sort of the risk tier. How much risk do you like? And I think I don't know what I would want to do with Jordan Reed because I feel like he's far more likely to get hurt, but I don't know how I would weigh his injury potential versus how hurt Andrew Luck is, and I think that matters a lot to Jack Doyle. Not to say that he would be a disaster if Jacoby Brissett was starting, but we know that he can be really good if Andrew Luck is there. So I think I would have him in the same order. Granted, if it comes out like Luck can't throw, then you would obviously move him down. But what do you do with Reed? I think Alex Smith might actually help him here.
See, I think it will. Look at Alex Smith and the usage of Travis Kelce. I think it definitely could help him. The thing with Reed is it's never been about ability. It's been about health, and you just talked about all of it. The only upside and glimmer I have and why I seemingly am being a little bit aggressive with the projections is because they're addressing the issue this offseason. Last year was the trying to play through it. There wasn't surgery that they focused on too much with. They tried the rehab. They tried, he had some work done. He did have some, but not to the level that they're addressing it this offseason. So if he can get this foot issue, the toe issue, everything behind him and go into the season, start the season at 100% or whatever 100% for Jordan Reed calculates as, I think that's why you can hope. Like, even if he gets 14 games, similar to Gronkowski, the 14 games of Jordan Reed and the replacement value that you get for the other two will probably be a top 5 tight end.
The next 10 in your rankings, 11 to 20, goes Tyler Eifert, back in Cincinnati at number 11. Charles Clay, one of the few receiving options. In Buffalo, number 12. Trey Burton, now in Chicago. Cameron Brate, Jared Cook, David Njoku, Austin Hooper, George Kittle me Timbers, Ben Watson in New Orleans, and Ricky Seals-Jones in Arizona. The one name that you have at number 23 I thought would be a lot higher, and someone that I don't know if I'm going to go out of my way to target, but could provide pretty good value. What's that?
Refrigeration.
Yeah, Vance McDonald, Vance Refrigeration. Like, I see him as potentially being, I guess he's the number 4 pass catcher on this team after Brown, after Smith-Schuster, and after Le'Veon Bell. But I just see the way that Ben Roethlisberger, after he got healthy, leaned on him towards the end of the season. And we know that Ben can be up and down week to week, and this might not translate at all, but he's probably someone who's going to go relatively undrafted or at least go very late that I do think that has some upside in this offense. Yeah,
see, I don't know how I really feel about Vance also for the fact, you want to talk about Jordan Reed. Vance is on a similar page of he's always banged up. He's always not missing as much time as Jordan Reed, but seemingly always is dealing with something, at least with what it feels like. And you look at Ben Roethlisberger, yes, he has relied on him, but it comes back to the other part that you said to start. And that's the biggest factor. Is best case scenario, he's fourth, arguably might even be fifth when you talk about targets and opportunity on this team. And that's really what it comes down to, is just what kind of opportunity you look at. And right now, as of today, and, I work on these as we talk about every single year, all the way up through August. I only have him for 37 receptions, 449 yards, and about 4 touchdowns. It's just, is he really going to get that much past that? And they have other options on this team where if it's not Vance, it just might be split up. Like the past couple seasons since Heath Miller, it's been split up through a couple options. And I don't know that Samuels is the one that they drafted. I don't know that he doesn't get in the mix.
Well, I just look at some of the guys ahead of him. Like Ben Watson, I guess you could make a compelling case for being in New Orleans with Drew Brees, and if they're passing more and there's no Engram, there could be touchdown upside. And hey, he's sort of like the minor league version of Delanie Walker. Ben Watson just, no matter how old he gets, he just keeps going and going and going. But like Austin Hooper and Jared Cook and those guys, I'd rather just take the chance that Vance McDonald becomes a bigger part of this offense.
Again, it's the threat of Samuels and it's the opportunity of targets. With those kind of guys, Austin Hooper, he legitimately is the number 4.
Yeah, but you're never going to play those guys. At least in that offense, there could be upside for McDonald. And if there is none, you can just...
I think there's upside for Austin Hooper.
I don't know about that.
Seriously, who else do you really like? Ben Watson being the only tight end? That's the Saints.
Yeah, no, listen, I don't mind that. I would have Watson higher. And I think that is Njoku going to be the guy that gets wildly overdrafted now that Hunter Henry's out?
Oh, well, okay, so 2 things is, one is David Njoku's legitimate, 100%. He's another Evan Engram. You just want him to go out and passing routes, so don't ask him to block too much. And they're already excited, running plays and all that type of stuff for him, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, sure, the upside's limited a little bit by Tyrod Taylor. He's not going to start throwing for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns over a season. But the fact is, you saw Tyrod Taylor's connection with Charles Clay for all those years. I think Njoku is both. He is somebody that will break out this year, but also to your point, if you start drafting around fringe tight end 1, well, now you're doing what I always say don't do, buying all the risk. Now he has to have his breakout season and has to perform at that value. I think that's going to be too high. I have him down at 16? I think 16 is a reasonable spot. And again, to talk about the difference between these guys, talking about a gap of 10 to 15 fantasy points.
Well, I think that he's going to end up becoming more of a DraftKings play for me. I'll probably own 0 shares of Njoku, at least how it's going to pan out right now, because I would rather have Vance McDonald. At least I'd rather want to have a piece of that offense than being the 4th option in the Browns offense.
See, I'll tell you what. There's 2 names in here where it talk about what you have to pay for them and opportunity-wise, where I would have no problem taking waiting to take Vance McDonald over what you have to pay for the 2 guys. And that's Trey Burton and it's George Kittle, because everybody for Chicago is forgetting that Adam Shaheen's there and that the fact that Bears still like him. I don't know that Trey Burton's just going to come in and be the Trey Burton we saw when Zach Ertz got hurt and oh my God, he's getting 80% of the tight end share and all this other type of stuff. I don't think that's a guarantee. I don't think Shaheen's not going to be involved.
Also, the case that's never made about any of these Bears guys, Allen Robinson included, what if Trubisky's just not good?
I actually think he is.
Listen, you can think he is all he is, but you're not leaving no one's leaving the opportunity for it. What if he isn't?
No, that's what I was going to say. I think he is. I wrote an article saying he was this year's Jared Goff back in February, I think so. It was either January or February. There's still the opportunity that, yes, all the flaws that you saw from last year carry over, and no, he never becomes anything better. And the same thing with Jared Goff. There was a chance that Jared Goff, going from looking like the worst quarterback in the NFL, was never anything more than maybe middle-level backup. But you're right. That's what you have to factor in. So that's part of the equation, too. You can go to the Garrett Selleck argument. This team that's still talking about Selleck being involved for George Kittle, and everybody wants George Kittle. Well, guess what? They still like Selleck. They still keep involving Selleck. And what about Jimmy Garoppolo? You look at some of the teams he played. You look at his numbers. Well, let's be realistic about what Jimmy did down the stretch. The wins were nice, but performance-wise, what if Jimmy really isn't the savior of the 49ers?
I think that's in the range of outcomes. Now, I believe more in Garoppolo than I do in Mitch Trubisky. And not to say that I think that Trubisky's going to be bad, but I think that if we're not weighing the fact that they could be on the range of outcome scale, even if it's 30% that he's bad, 70% he's good, it just seems like and listen, I'm guilty of this too. We all are. That you just talk about, like, people get so enamored with the perfect scenario for all of these guys that no one factors in some of the downside to it. And maybe at these picks, it doesn't matter. But if you're going to start overdrafting them, like you said, you're now buying up all the risk.
Right. And well, so here's a good comparison. You and I talk about this every single year. What do you and I both do with the Patriots running backs? We always draft the last one on the board. Well, if you're talking about the Vance McDonalds, Kittles, Burtons, Austin Hoopers, and Njokus, all these guys, you know what? I'll just wait. And once there's only one or two left, I'll take one of the last guys on the board.
Cameron Brate you have at number 14, and you have O.J. Howard at number 27. There's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. It's just another one where we saw it happen to Mike Evans last year, that all of a sudden when you're not commanding like a 35% market share, frankly, you're not as good in fantasy. Just how it works out. And Jameis loves to throw to these two dudes when it comes to getting near the goal line. They're big bodies, and the defense's attention is going to be on the large body of Mike Evans. So you take him out of the equation, he's doubled or he's segregated off in the corner. These two guys could be open. Why do you like Brate significantly more than you like O.J. Howard in year two?
So, well, first, it's 30-point gap. So that is kind of significant to your point, but it really comes down to skill and situation for this team for this year. Same thing I said about O.J. Howard last year, and why I told people not to get excited about him for fantasy purposes as a rookie especially, is because you'll remember this conversation. You and I had it last year. Is I likened it to the Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez situation for the back, is that Gronkowski always was the better blocker. Aaron Hernandez was always the better receiver. Well, obviously Gronkowski's just amazing at both, and there's nothing you can do to stop him. But this situation, because O.J. Howard is the better blocker than Cameron Brate, and you don't want Brate blocking if you have the choice between the two, you're going to ask O.J. Howard to stay at the line of scrimmage and run less routes. Running less routes means less targets, less share, and you just waterfall effect down from Jameis Winston. The second part of it is, one, Deshaun Jackson's coming back. He's going to eat up some of that himself for how long he stays healthy. Chris Godwin is coming into his second year. He could be a threat. But also the drafting of Ronald Jones. They could run more in the red zone. They're one of the worst teams at scoring rushing touchdowns, especially when you take away Jameis Winston in the red zone from last year. The fact is, I think you get more of a balance now. So all these pieces put together just means I don't see where the opportunity is for Howard unless Brate gets hurt.
Charles Clay you have at number 12. He's not currently being drafted inside the top 20 at tight end.
But that's because Charles Clay is the poor man's Delanie Walker. He continues to produce every single year. He also gets hurt every single year. But the games that he's out there, for PPR specifically, he's always going to give you 7, 8, 9 points as his floor every single week. Occasionally catches a touchdown and gets you the double-digit points. And he ends up in this range because what do I have him for? I have him for 58 receptions, around 600 yards, only 3 touchdowns. But that's what Charles Clay is every single year.
Would you be better just streaming tight ends and hoping to get lucky than having Charles Clay every week?
I would. I definitely would. Like, this is the ranking is not an endorsement to go draft Charles Clay.
So Ricky Seals-Jones, what do you make of him in this new look Arizona offense? Because I just think it really benefits David Johnson, no matter if it's Sam Bradford or Josh Rosen who starts week 1 or gets a majority of the starts throughout the year. Fitz and David Johnson have to benefit the most based on the way that those guys play. Seals-Jones was like kind of their stretch guy last season. You had like the Browns out there running like flies down the field, but up the seams, it was all Sealy-Jones like when he would get in. And he was like the most efficient player in the history of football. 4 catches, 80 yards and a touchdown. Every single be like, what the hell's going on here? So at last year when we talked about it, you weren't so much of a believer. And at number 20, obviously you aren't really buying in all that much, but is he viable?
No, I am buying in that much. It's just the problem is I was even aggressive in my rankings compared to everybody else, but it's still hard to project him for too much with Larry Fitzgerald and David Johnson. Plus, I'm a fan of Christian Kirk, and I think he's the second best receiver immediately.
Oh, his new name is just Coked Out Christian.
Okay. Well, speaking of names, are you not a Rick and Morty fan?
A what?
Rick and Morty.
No, this is Ricky Seals and Croft. Come on now.
No, it's Pickle Rick Seals-Jones.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
Who's the one who gives out the nicknames? Me or you?
Me. You just do it a lot more than I do.
I just, people remember the ones that I say.
Oh, hey, you started using my Mohammed Sanu.
I asked you for one. I thought that was good, and that's the one that people don't remember.
No. Thanks. Yeah. Yes, they do. They love my snoo references on Twitter. At least mine. See, I have a different following than you do. That's
This is true. My nicknames tend to be more insulting and aggressive.
Fair enough. All right. So in any case, I actually wrote him up as the potential breakout tight end this year. If you're looking for not the common names, if you're looking for non-Trey Burton, you said Hunter Henry was obvious at that point. If you're looking down the list and you're saying, who's somebody who could get up to that fringe tight end one level that's really costing you nothing because he's going basically undrafted everywhere at this point, and that's Ricky Seals-Jones. You saw it, as you said, towards the end of last year. The biggest threat into his ability for this season is what I just said, is, coked out Christian Kirk is going to affect it. David Johnson being healthy is going to affect it. How long Sam Bradford lasts, whether it's 3 games or 4, that's going to affect it with Josh Rosen. But if you say, look at this roster and tell me who's the 4th option, I think similar to your Vance McDonald situation, he is their 4th option. I think that he can make a decent impact this year.
Does Austin Seferian-Jenkins have the ability to monopolize the market share of Jacksonville tight end targets, at least? He was good last year. He really was. And it seems like he'd be an easy pass, if nothing else, for Blake Bortles.
He would be, but it's also Blake Bortles, and this team also has, 17,000 receivers?
Oh, yeah, and there's nothing worse that all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, Austin Seferian-Jenkins session. Oh, now it's Ben Koyak. It's like, oh, great. Oh, it's O'Shaughnessy. Here he comes.
And that was the thing. How long we were doing this with Mercedes Lewis and the rest of the tight end options for the Jaguars. It always seems to be, you get all this value, and then you get what you're saying is why those names were relevant is because you get to the red zone, and all of a sudden it's the other guy. Even when Julius Thomas was in the mix, it was always somebody else. So yes, he has that opportunity, but you're also asking an offense that's run Blake Bortles that is going to be more run heavy as it has been. I mean, really, how much can we put? Even if you gave him, to the conversation from before, even if you gave him 80% of the tight end share for this team, really, what is that? Is that even tight end 1?
And they don't have Clay Harbor anymore to steal away touchdowns. He's too busy being on The Bachelorette.
No, they just have 17 number 2 wide receivers.
I just wanted to say Clay Harbor's on The Bachelorette this season.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he is. And his eyes, his eyes are really far apart. It's weird.
Oh, he's got fish face?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, this is gonna sound so cruel, but I like people like that. I'm not gonna guess. It's hard for me because I don't know where to look.
I mean, the key move to ever get past him if he was blocking was stand directly in front of him. You wouldn't have been able to see it.
It was like a bird.
Yeah. Rookie tight ends. With Engram having so much success last season, OJ Howard, flashed in spots. Njoku had a few good weeks. Sheehan did pretty good as well. Do we make anything of these guys, or are they just on the do not draft list like normal rookie tight ends?
Who was the one you asked about? Because I was still laughing from the bird face.
Just all of them. Is there one that you're interested in?
Oh, rookie tight ends in general?
Yeah.
No, I mean, honestly, if it was the fact that the Ravens only drafted 1, then yes. The weird part about it is the Ravens being as great as the Newsome and everything. You got to give him so much credit. I love the Lamar Jackson pick. That baffled me. They took the better tight end later in the draft, that being Andrews over Hayden Hurst. This is this situation for people that want to be excited about the Ravens tight end. This is OJ Howard and Cameron Brate all over again.
Okay, so you think that Mark Andrews is better than Hayden Hurst Helmsley?
Yes.
Okay.
In the passing game specifically.
Okay.
Hurst is a better blocker. Hurst actually compared to Dwayne Allen. Hurst is a decent all-around guy, but he's going to be asked to block more. Mark Andrews, you send out receiving. It's going to be split either way. You don't really want to deal with it. Maybe one of them gets banged up. Maybe somebody emerges early on and when the other one falters, you can hope for that. I think if you're looking at this draft class is going to be abysmal for fantasy value because the best case scenario is just Gesicki with the Dolphins because you have Goddard getting wasted away behind Zach Ertz.
Rico Gathers, Uncle Rico in Dallas, replacing Jason Witten. I think they've vacated 80% of their targets last year. If he's just standing on the field, he could be all right.
And a lot of people want that to happen. I'm looking for the other name now because I can't think of it off the top of my head. It's not Rico Gathers. It's the other one. That's the team's already talking for some reason. It's weird. This team is enamored with making Terrence Williams a receiver, and let alone their number 1 for this year if he stays at what type of suspension situation. And yet they're seemingly dead set against making Rico Gathers a thing. So I think it's going to be a tight end by committee for the Cowboys.
The Cowboys currently have 5 tight ends on their depth chart right now. We got Geoff Swaim, Uncle Rico, David Wells, the lefty coming in from the bullpen, Blake Jarwin, Dalton Schultz. Here we go.
Schultz, that was the one.
Yeah, he's the rookie.
I've seen a couple people or beat reporters already start talking about him, and it's to stay away.
Anyone else you want to give a shout out to here? Like, I know Ed Dixon can't catch, but Russell Wilson seems fond of throwing to tight ends in the red zone. Maybe it's Nick Vanette.
No, I mean, honestly, you know what? I'll give you one. Don't forget about the other Wilson with 2 L's. Luke Wilson going to the Lions to replace no hands Eric Ebron. I mean, maybe Luke Wilson could be something with Matthew Stafford if Kenny Golladay doesn't step up and just absorb all the number 3 targets on that team.
What about Ryan Griffin in Houston with no more CJ Fedorowicz?
I think that Jordan Akins is a nice rookie for them, and they could kind of battle each other all year. All
right. Tight end sucks, man.
Yeah, it does. I mean, this is why in so many of my leagues, if you haven't implemented a lot of flex just for it adds more strategy and more fun, especially at the draft, I've moved a lot of the leagues to wide receiver, tight end flex for that spot instead of just tight end flat only.
No, you're making it too easy for people. Make them play at tight end.
It's not easy because you're already mandatorily starting 3 wide receivers. You have another flex, so the conversation doesn't become like it's not. See, everybody says that it's not easy. I'm looking at wide receiver right now. It's not like you're sitting there going, "Should I start Pierre Garçon or Austin Hooper?" No, the conversation becomes, "Do I start Jared Cook or Deshaun Jackson?"
Jackson.
But I don't know that's a guarantee given the matchup.
Now you're like, do I start Randall Cobb or one of these loser tight ends? Do I start Marquise Lee or one of these loser tight ends? They just start that receiver.
It's not always that easy.
It is always that easy.
Because
Jared
the tight ends...
Well, here's a rule. Never play Jared Cook. That'll work out.
No, okay, so that's true. But the point being is the only tight ends that are guaranteed to start there that you don't start having conversations with 5th wide receivers are the big 6 or 7.
All right. Before we get out of here, I want to ask you about just overall draft strategy this season. If you had the first overall pick, and I've been asking everyone this, what do? Do you take one of the 3 running backs? Do you take Antonio Brown? Because I'm convinced that there is a case for Antonio Brown as the number 1 pick in a PPR league.
There's a case for it. I'm not doing it. I'm taking Le'Veon Bell. I don't care about the contract situation. I'm taking Le'Veon Bell. Yes, there's risk for that. If you don't want to do it, if you want to take Todd Gurley, I don't have a problem with it because as of today, honestly, Le'Veon Bell decides to pull the situation of sitting out the first 4, 6, 10 games and pull the whole, I want to just get my contract unrestricted free agency next year. There's certainly that consideration to be had. But as it stands, if he's playing 16 games, it's Le'Veon Bell for me. I understand Antonio Brown in the PPR. I want my bell cow. I know you and I have actually talked about this before. I see the value that's there sometimes at the end of the second round. I don't want McKinnon to be my number 1 running back. I don't want Jordan Howard in the PPR to be my number 1 running back. And I'm a Jordan Howard apologist. I don't want those guys to be my number 1 running back, even with Antonio Brown. I'm taking Antonio Brown 5th and actually behind those 3. And then Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, whichever way you want to do it, Antonio Brown, and then Saquon Barkley is the order I'm going.
Yeah, I'm still trying to piece that together in my head of where I'm going to rank them over. Antonio Brown's going to be inside my top 5, probably at number 4, maybe number 1. We'll see. But I think that those 3 running backs, I don't think that Zeke is on the level of David Johnson or Le'Veon Bell or Todd Gurley. I think he's just 1 step removed. I think he's closer to Barkley than those guys up top because I would draft DeAndre Hopkins over both those other running backs too.
I wouldn't, and I think people are getting a little too excited about DeAndre Hopkins.
People aren't excited enough about DeAndre Hopkins.
He didn't even catch 100 balls last year. Yeah, he does Deshaun Watson for the entire season. 2nd year playing football. Let's be realistic here and not overhype somebody.
I don't care how bad Deshaun Watson is this year. He will be 80 million times better than basically everyone else that has ever thrown a ball to DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, we said that about a lot of people before, and it hasn't come through. So, I understand it. I'm just not going to draft him over David Johnson or Ezekiel Elliott. If you want to, go right ahead. I'm just not. And I understand, so to talk about the whole tier situation is so sliver of a difference between you. But in a PPR, I would have Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson by themselves. Zeke kind of all alone. Saquon Barkley all alone. And then the rest. Actually, no, I put Barkley and Kamara together.
Okay. Jake Ciely, All In Kid, on Twitter, RotoExperts.com, Fantasy Sports Network, Fantasy Radio. Let's the peoples know about where they can...
on target?
I'm going to let you say it. Tell the peoples where they can listen to you and watch you.
Oh, thank you for that. Which I have to have you on soon here as soon as I go to full-time football. But yes, the On Target podcast, that's all that really matters. And as Pat always does, go to iTunes and give it 5 stars and a review because that just helps me. Although now that I'm solo host, I might not get 5 stars anymore because it's just me. But yeah, go check it out. And then you mentioned all the other places. I tweet out the links to everything. That's the easiest way to do it is just follow me on Twitter because I tweet everything out.
That's true. Check the link. That's what the Twitter's for helping you find this info.
Go back and listen to the episode. I hosted the creator of Final Space, which is one of the best TV shows in existence, Olin Rogers. So go check out that episode.
Yeah, when's that from so people can go and search the date for it?
I think it's about 2 weeks ago now.
So we're looking like beginning of May?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Jake Ciely, thank you for being on the line. I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and the Facebooks. At the PME, give the episode a like, rate, and review the podcast. Help keep it free. I would appreciate that. And I bet you a lot of people watching, although my advice is terrible, my guest advice, top-notch stuff. You find all my work on the DK Playbook as well. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. That'll do it for Football Rankings Week. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!